Welcome to the Building Up Women in Property podcast. I'm your host, Rebecca Bangura, and I'm thrilled to have you here with me today. This podcast is for ambitious women who work in property and construction, who want to learn how to have a career they love on their terms. Join me every week where I'll leave you excited and confident to take your next steps. Thanks for being here with me. Now let's get started. Hello, thank you for being here. Today we are talking about one of my personal superpowers, which is effective stakeholder management. I often talk about playing to your strengths. How do you find that thing or those couple of things that you do better than anyone else? And how do you maximize that natural skill, that natural ability through your work so that you can increase your impact and your influence? And someone recently asked me, what are your superpowers? And I think top of that list is stakeholder management. And I'll be honest, I thought that everyone knew how to do this. I thought that how to engage people, how to effectively communicate with them, how to take them on the journey and ensure the best outcomes possible, I thought that came naturally to people. But time and time again, I've been proven wrong. I found that actually this is a very deliberate skill. And it's something that certainly I've cultivated over time, but it's also come naturally to me. And I share that with you for a couple of reasons. First is, quite often we think that the things we are good at, everyone is good at. So we actually take it for granted. We don't see our own brilliance in ourselves because we assume that everyone else can do this too. And it's simply not true. We all have particular skill sets, things we're good at, things we are not so good at. And once you really get clear on your key things, your superpowers, it becomes so much easier to play to that strength and differentiate yourself from others. The second reason I share that is because whilst I have a natural ability to manage people and stakeholders well, it's also a skill that I've actively cultivated over time. I am an absolute personal development junkie. It's kind of how I landed. I've always loved personal development and growing my mind and improving on my skill set since I was a child. And I read a lot. I listen to lots of podcasts. I take lots of courses. I've always really intentionally built my skill set and really cultivated sort of this growth mindset. And I think that whilst a lot of my ability to work with people and manage people effectively and manage stakeholders effectively has come naturally, I think I've also just picked things up on the way through that process of growth and educating myself and working with great people. I've been very able to take the best bits and adapt that to my own natural style. And I think it's so important to realize that when we talk about stakeholders and stakeholder management, I want you to recognize that there is no single one right way of doing things. A lot of this is going to be driven by who you are as a person. And I want to invite you to lean into being more of who you are rather than trying to be someone you think you should be. But what we want to do is make sure you're applying a sound process to your stakeholder engagements so that you have these strong relationships and you can deliver positive outcomes. Because stakeholder management, by its very nature, is always going to be complex. There are lots of people who have lots of opinions, different interests, different needs, different desires, and quite often they are competing. So it's about how do we prioritize, how do we engage, how do we take people on the journey, and how do we create an end result where everyone feels satisfied, where respect is still there is trust, where we've delivered on the expectations that were set, and where people can generally just walk away from that interaction feeling positive about it. And that doesn't mean that everyone got what they wanted. That's rarely going to be the case, but it's about how do we leave everyone with a good taste in their mouth about that experience? How do we leave them with a positive point of reference in terms of the overall outcomes of a project or an experience, but also how they think of you personally? Because how you manage stakeholders is a direct reflection of your personal brand. And that's true whether you have an internal facing role and your stakeholders are within your organization, or whether it's an external facing role and it's clients and members of the public and a broader audience. Whoever it is that you are interacting with, they will think about their experience working with you and the outcomes that were delivered. Taking a step back, what is stakeholder management? Stakeholder management is about identifying and effectively engaging with people who are impacted or are interested in your work. So as we talk through this, I'm going to give an example of building a building, right? Very basic, but something that everyone can probably appreciate because I find often we need the context to really be able to apply some of these concepts. So if you think about the example of building a building, there are so many stakeholders in that process. You will have the owner or the developer. You will have the tenant or end user. You will have neighbours. Some might be residential, some might be commercial. You will have local governments. You may have state governments. You may have different community groups. All of these people are interested in what you are doing. Now, some will be directly impacted by the work that you do, by the building that you build, and others won't be, but they will still be interested. That's really important to recognise because we tend to think of the obvious people who are involved in the process, who will benefit directly from the end result. But we often forget about the broader group, the people who may just be sitting in the wings watching, but they have an interest in this. So again, going back to that example, owners of other land locally might be interested in your development because how your development goes may increase the value of their land. If you manage to change zoning laws for your development, that will influence their ability to change zoning laws for the land they own. So those local owners are not directly impacted by the work you are doing, but indirectly, they are absolutely, and they may care a lot. And, another example is residential neighbours. If you're building a commercial building or a mixed-use facility, local residents will care. Some will be for the development, they'll be for progress and the jobs and the additional people it will bring to the local area. Other people will not be. Other people will resist change. They'll be worried about the traffic impacts. They will be worried to the types of people you'll be bringing into their neighbourhood. And all of these concerns, all of these interests are valid. And that really is the most important thing when we start to think about our stakeholders, is to identify who they are. And think big here. Think about the immediate people, the obvious people who will be impacted, and then think about the less obvious and keep going out and out. Keep widening your circle and considering all the people who will be interested in this, both in terms of the process you go through and also the outcomes. And what you'll find is this is like peeling an onion, right? There's more and more and more layers. But where you want to start is just understanding anyone and everyone who could care about the work you're delivering. And then you want to actually start to analyze this. So this is this next level where we go a bit deeper. Start to think about who are these people as individuals, not just as collectives, but who are they as individuals? What matters to them? What are they concerned about? What are their deepest desires and concerns and fears around this project, around, this building we're building? What do they care about in this? And start to think about what is the best outcome that they're hopeful for and what is the worst outcome for them. And really think about that impact. Like, why is that worst outcome the worst outcome for them? What is the impact for them? And then you also want to think about what is their impact and their influence.
I hope you've been enjoying the episode. I wanted to take a moment to let you know about my free Career Confidence Masterclass. This is for ambitious career-orientated women who are ready to stop playing small and to confidently create a career you love. Head over to my website, beautifuldisruptions.com, for more info. Now let's get back to the episode.
So some people in every project are the key decision makers. So that might be your project sponsor, the people who have the budget, the people who legislate or provide zoning approvals or DAs. So local governments, for example. So governments are really influential in the process. But you could also have a really active community group who are fantastic at lobbying, right? So they might have a huge amount of influence, much more than an individual resident who writes a letter. Unless, of course, that individual has a position of importance or is particularly respected within the community, right? So start to understand the depth and the influence and the impacts to each of these stakeholders. And as I said before, you've got your developer, right? They want to maximise the value of this development. They will be looking to increase densities if they can, potentially change land usage. They'll be looking to get this project up and running in the shortest amount of time so they can lease out this facility and start to earn income. They will care about the quality of this build because that's their long-term asset. They will care about the overall capital cost. They will care about their brand and reputation in this process, particularly if they are looking to do other developments or if they're a big player in the market. They will absolutely care about that. You then have the user. So who are the potential tenants in this building? What do they need? Is it fit for purpose? Has it been designed with the ideal tenant in mind? Or is there already a tenant on board that you need to engage with and really understand what they need? What are their constraints? What are their must-haves? Then, as I said, neighbours, all of their different concerns. Local governments, the builder. What does the builder need? What's their time frame? What are their concerns about supply chain issues? What are their concerns about access? All of these things feed in. And I'm explaining this sort of very much from my project manager point of view. But you need to understand all of these different elements and start to think of them as cogs in the process. And they all have an impact on each other and the overall outcome of a project. They all help define the success of a project. And the more we really think about this and consider all of these impacts, all of these competing desires and interests, the better able we are to handle these situations when they come up and have these conversations in a really meaningful and engaged way. Because ultimately, the best outcome for any project is to deliver the best outcomes possible for everyone. But of course, that's not the reality. You are always going to have to act in the best interest of the person whose project it is you are delivering. But that doesn't mean that you have to screw everyone else in the process, right? We want to try and avoid that. We want to try and create as many win-wins in this situation as possible. And we need to understand what people need in order to frame it that way, in order to create those opportunities, seek that engagement, seek that input, and understand what we don't know in the process. Because until we start talking to people, and this is the next point, right, really starting to engage with people, until we start that process, we do not know all of the things. We cannot anticipate everything. And not everyone will be willing to share their deepest, darkest concerns and hopes to us, right? We need to go in and build trusting, mutually beneficial relationships. We need to demonstrate respect and really earn people's trust, particularly when it's a stakeholder who may be skeptical of what we're doing, who may not agree with what we're trying to achieve. So as we engage with people, we need to be really conscious of our position and we need to be conscious of how we communicate, right? Because communication, again, is a cornerstone of stakeholder management. We need to make sure we're communicating in a way where people feel seen and people feel heard and people feel respected. We need to be as transparent as we possibly can because transparency builds trust. Even if someone doesn't like what you're doing, if you're transparent and open with them and you're willing to have a conversation with them, that will build trust and respect. If you keep everything behind closed doors and then put up a glossy poster saying, this is what we're doing, expect this new building in 2 years' time, people will not be happy because they feel that they've been shut out of the process. They feel they haven't been consulted, they haven't been engaged, their inputs haven't been sought out. We really need to start every interaction, whether it's a project, whether it's building a building, whether it's starting a new client relationship, we need to start as we mean to go on and set a really solid foundation for what that relationship will be. Because once we lose trust, it is very hard to rebuild it. And stakeholder management at its core is about building strong, trusting relationships. And that requires you to really show empathy in this process, to create opportunities and forums for collaboration and sharing ideas and having those tough conversations. Because the truth is, there are going to be so many hard conversations that have to be had. And shying away from those doesn't help anyone. And what I've always found to be true is that when you approach any conversation from a place of trust, respect, and kindness, people are receptive to what you'll say, even if they don't get the outcome they want, even if they completely disagree with what ends up eventuating. If you stay true to those three values, trust, respect, and kindness, then your personal brand will remain intact, as well as the brand of the organization you're working for. Because how we manage conflict is so important, right? It's how we manage the things that aren't going well that is actually more important than how we manage things when things are going well, right? And this is a bit of a tangent, but there's so much research around customer experience. And what's been found is if someone has a negative interaction with an organization, how that organization responds can make or break the relationship. And what I mean by that is if someone has an incident or a problem and an organization responds in a positive way, you have the opportunity to strengthen that relationship so that they become an advocate for you, which is actually a much better outcome than if they had had no problem at all, if they just had an okay experience. So think about this. Every interaction is an opportunity to build that positive relationship and that positive experience for people. So lean into that. Think about how you can engage in the most effective ways and be aware that there is no one size fits all. You will need to engage and communicate in 20 different ways for 20 different stakeholders, or a combination of different ways to communicate and engage for each stakeholder. Stakeholder management is complex. It is messy. But when you really approach it from this space of how do I support people? How am I transparent? How do I build trust? And you take the time to really think about who needs to be involved in this and who cares about the outcomes of this project, it will set you up for success. This is true for any work project, for any organization, and for any relationship. Take and apply these principles, right? Identify who's in the process, analyze it, engage with them, and communicate with them. And of course, the last part is also have that feedback loop. Check in what's working, what isn't. And when things aren't working, take a step back and be adaptable. Change course, try something new. Ask that feedback and then implement from it. Because at the core of everything, people want to be seen and they want to be heard. Even if the outcome is not what they want that acknowledgement. They want to know that their opinion was considered, that someone saw them, that someone took the time to understand their perspective. That counts for so much, even if they don't get what they want in the end. That acknowledgement, that respect you give to them is at the core of what we want as people. That's what we want as humans. And from my personal experience, it has allowed me to have some extremely tough conversations and to walk away still having a mutual respect, still having that positive association with each other. Even though things may not have gone as they had hoped, there is still that respect. By being empathetic, by giving people space to share their concerns, by collaboration and cooperation and transparency, that's how you manage these complex relationships. That's how you manage stakeholders. And it's also how you sleep at night, knowing you delivered the best thing you could in the circumstances you have. And for me, that's really important. My integrity, how I interact with people, that matters to me. And that's why I really do try and go above and beyond in terms of creating the best stakeholder experience. And I want to leave you with this. Think about who you want to be. How do you want people to think of you? Right? What are those words that define who you are? And then think about how you can express that to your stakeholders, whether it's managing your team, whether it's managing a big project, whether it's managing a company brand. Think about who you want to be and how you can reflect your personal values or your organizational values in every stakeholder interaction. And you don't have to get it right all of the time. You won't. We never do. None of us do. It's about getting better day in, day out and practicing this and putting the time into understanding what people need from you, from this process, from this project, and doing the absolute best you can in every interaction. Okay, I'm going to leave it there, my friend. Have a beautiful day. Until next time.
Thanks for joining me on the Building Up Women in Property podcast. If you're listening on Apple Podcast or Spotify, I'd love for you to take a moment and review the show if you found it helpful, or share it with a few friends. Thanks again, have a beautiful day, and I'll see you next time.